I mean, I'll even put up with bad audio above not hitting record.
Yeah, right.
So
That's funny.
cool. This is exciting. So yeah, I mean, basically I just jump right into it and do like literally like a 10-second intro and throw it to you and let you talk about yourself, what you're doing. And then I'll just prompt you with some questions and we'll go from there.
Great. That sounds perfect.
Let me shut off my phone because it just buzzed. So that means I still have my settings on. I don't need that. You have any questions or anything before we hop on here?
No, I think we'll just yeah.
How do you want to be introduced? Just as Billy from Story on the Pass?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. All right, there we go. All right, welcome everyone. This is Chris with the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And today I have a guest on. This is Billy from Story on the Pass. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. So I always kind of let everyone do their own intro. Why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, how it relates to food, and what Story on the Pass is.
Yeah, great. So I created Story in the Pass. Actually, it's 1 month and 2 days. So still in the baby and infant phase. And I created it in order to tell the story of the chef. So every chef and cook kind of has their own background story of how they got involved with cooking, their journey. Everyone kind of has a different journey into how they got into the kitchen, how they advanced into the kitchen, and it's just really about showing that story through a recipe. So a lot of times, like, chefs won't get the notoriety, or people won't really get to know them unless they're famous, right? Like the Gordon Ramsays of the world, etc. So this is kind of like a platform in order to give the voice of the everyday chef, but also since the COVID-19, I'm actually developing a cookbook from the stories. I'm creating a community cookbook in Denver. That's where I'm from, and I live. I'm originally from Chicago, but moved here 2 years ago. So I created it in order to kind of make a community cookbook, tell the story of the chefs in the restaurants, kind of put a human feel to the people who cook your food. And the proceeds will go to the Denver restaurants and to the nonprofit organizations within the Denver community. And a little bit about my background. So in Chicago, I started in the industry as a host, and I kind of bounced around. I always like to know the whole, what goes on in a restaurant, every kind of facet. So I bounced around from, actually I started as a security guard, a host, bartending, and eventually kind of led me to see, wonder what's going on in the kitchen. So I staged a couple of days in the kitchen. I loved it. Ended up going to culinary school and worked in the kitchen for about 3 more years. And then it was about 8 years in total. And it was a little, got a little worn out, it was a lot. Like my last managing position, I was working about 70 hours a week, and pay was not great. And it was just a lot of stress. And eventually I just decided to call it quits, and took me down a different career path right now. But in a sense, I've always been drawn, or the restaurant life and the culinary scene has always been very close to me. Like, my brain has never really shut off. When I go into a restaurant, I'm always thinking, what's the lights, the temperature, the music volumes, how does it all incorporate into the dining experience? And you never really quite get away from it, even though I've been away for a little over 2 years.
So is there one definitive thing that prompted this whole Story on the Pass to come about?
Well, I guess using my own experience through food. So I grew up in a Greek family. So, like, food it was a big part of family festivities, kind of to bring everybody together and share and break bread. And I really didn't know the impact of food until my grandmother passed. So my grandmother passed. It was right around the holidays, and it was very abrupt. And, like, we didn't really see it coming, and we were kind of like emptying out the house and the refrigerator. And we kind of and when we were going through the freezer, we took out some trays and it had like my sister's name on it. And kind of, that really just showed me what the impact of food is. Like a lot of people can say, I love you, right? In a way, but not a lot of people kind of show it through either like, oh, are you hungry? Or can I feed you? There's other ways to show that without having to express that. So I've always kind of had that bond with food as a something that can kind of bring everybody together, bring people from all different types of backgrounds, and which ultimately has led me to travel. I've traveled roughly around like 50 different countries, mostly just eating my way through. I just, find a cuisine that I like. I want to go and explore it and talk to the locals, talk to the chefs, and it's just a way to bridge that gap. And that's kind of my philosophy within food, and just being within the industry. Just there's so many different backgrounds that collide within a kitchen and within the restaurant space or in food industry in general. And so it all tied each other together. And then with COVID-19, it was just a way of what could I do to help my brothers and sisters out. And so that was the springboard into what I have today.
And I think, chefs can go a couple ways. There's we're just going to put a lasagna on the menu because people love it. And then there's this is the lasagna that my grandmother made, or this is a dish that I created because of X, Y, and Z. And I think you can quite often feel that when you go into a restaurant. Sometimes you're going in a place and they're just going through the motions. They're making good food, but it seems like the chef and the cooks aren't necessarily connected to it. And I think when you have this really strong story, whether it is something you grew up with, it's like I'm from New England and my mom had this baked bean recipe, and I just made it the other day. And for me, I get really excited about it. It's a very humble dish, but it was like one of the first things I learned to make. And, that's something that I love to share with customers. It's not the most innovative dish, but for me, when I'm cooking that, I hope that feeling comes through. And I think, those are some of the things I'm seeing with a lot of these recipes and stories.
Yeah, it definitely it shows through when you can feel the love within a dish when it has that story, or the chef puts in, I think, a little bit more effort into it, even if they don't really intend to, right? Because food a lot of times can serve as a memory of either people or events that kind of helped change and formulate somebody's aspect of their life. So having those different experiences and being able to share those, yeah, it definitely creates a memorable experience for both the person eating it and the person who's creating it.
Well, we've talked a lot on the show before about, it's tough. Is there a way that you can bring in like nostalgia to a guest who you don't know, right? So for like me, that dish of beans, there's a feeling associated, but you might not have any association with it. So is it a good dish to you if you don't have that? So is there some way you can kind of do that, or do you have to have a overwhelmingly positive dining experience and then they're just going to create their own connection with that dish, if you know what I mean? We've also said, like, what if you had a reservation at a restaurant tonight and you went to work and you got fired and you were in a terrible mood and then you still went to dinner? Would that underlying like terrible mood slant your impression of the restaurant and the dining experience? And is there anything as a chef or service staff that you could do to flip that? Or is it at that point just it's going to be what it's going to be? And those are the kind of things that I think about.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think too, whenever I think of going to a restaurant, when I was working in the industry, you're hosting somebody's evening. So usually it's either, the highlight of somebody's day, because they're getting to experience something different outside the norms, right? Or it's a celebratory evening. So, I think, service in a way can probably help change and formulate and hopefully make the experience better for the person, but I guess it's all determined within that, we're all individuals. So it all depends on that person's individual needs and if they want to be in a better mood, right? If somebody wants to be in a bad mood, be pouty, like they will, right? But if they want to, have a good time, they'll more likely be able to.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of places about these outstanding hospitality specialists who, they talk about getting staff to assess a table. It's like check in on that table. Where do you feel they are on a scale of 1 to 10 for enjoyment? And if they're a 7, what do we need to do to get them up a notch? I think front of the house can do so much to recover a situation in that respect.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, it's just a manager going and touching a table, just going and saying how you doing, making them feel like they're the most important guest in the restaurant. Because a lot of times too, a lot of times when you go out to eat, your only interaction is with the server, maybe the food runner, a busser, like saying hi there, little interaction. But when a manager has that ability to come in and actually care how the evening is going, I think that it elevates the experience just that much.
So, how long are you planning on continuing this endeavor? Is this something you hope continues? I mean, I know it's very much relating to COVID-19 right now, but is this long term something you want to keep telling the stories of these chefs and their dishes?
Yeah, definitely. So we're a month in, and it's been just very encouraging from the feedback that I've received from chefs, just saying thank you for letting me be able to like tell my story, promote my work, and it's just a little bit. It's positive reinforcement to help me keep doing what I'm doing. So the COVID was more of less the springboard, the catapult into starting it, and especially the cookbook aspect of it, being able to use those proceeds to hopefully help the restaurants and the employees within the industry. And so I'm hoping to obviously to keep on telling the story of the chef, but once I'm finished with the Denver Community Cookbook, I hope then to branch out to other cities as I get more inquiries and kind of judge to see maybe what chefs would be more willing to participate than others, or really use my network in Chicago to make a cookbook there, because it's been hard in Denver to reach out to chefs because I'm a complete unknown. Nobody knows me. I have no network here within the industry. So it's when I'm reaching out, they're like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Like why would I want to give my recipe or give my background story to this person? So it's been very very challenging in Denver, but I've been getting more high profile chefs more by the day, and especially in the Denver community, which is refreshing in a way. It's very tight knit, so it seems the chefs really want to help each other out. I would say in Chicago it's a little bit more cutthroat than it is in Denver, which is it's a breath of fresh air, especially being out of the industry for a couple of years.
And one of the questions I have for you is about your Instagram. We talk a lot about marketing on this podcast, and especially through internet marketing and social media. And I'm kind of stunned. I checked before we came on here. You have like 1,300 followers, and your first post was, I think, like April 6th. And I want to know like what the secret sauce was there, because that's hard. Like there's some pretty well-known chefs who I feel like haven't even gotten there, and they've been doing their Instagram. I mean, everyone will tell you they start their Instagram and it's like 3 years to get those kind of numbers. And how did you pull that off in a month? Was there anyone who was really supportive who shared your stuff, or was it because you already had pre-existing connections with people and they knew you from your personal Facebook or your personal Instagram or something?
So I haven't promoted it yet personally to my network. I've kind of just been working underneath the radar, just trying to see if I can just do this on my own without using my network. So what's kind of really been working with me is, I'm dependent on chefs being able and willing to share their story. So when I post their work, generally they tend to share their share what I've promoted on my site and on my Instagram. And I've just been I would follow some of the chefs in their network, and once people kind of see, oh, I know, I'm trying to bridge the gap in a way of using what we have mutually to for them to kind of follow me, if you follow what I'm saying. So they'll post their work. I'll generally just type in chef underneath what their followers are, and then try to follow some of their people. And if they follow me back, great. If not, it's no hard feelings, right? But that's been the greatest way to that's kind of launched my, or how I've been able to get the most amount of followers in the shortest amount of time, is kind of just bridging that gap using what the mutual interest that we have, and getting them in there, or and transferring them over. Facebook's been a little bit harder than Instagram. I think I'm about like 200 or so, but I don't really promote too much on Facebook. It's mostly just cross, like, sharing what I post on Instagram. And I've started to reach out to some groups, like with chef groups within Facebook, and just been like, talk to the admin, say, hey, do you mind if I post about my site? I'm just here to promote what chefs are doing, what kind of work, and try to tell their story. So that's I'm starting to see some traction, but it's hard as a one man show to, as write up the content, get people to sign up, and also like doing podcasts on the side, so it's a lot of work, but it's like I kind of said before, getting that positive reinforcement where a lot of chefs will be really thankful, or some chefs who haven't even participated just say, hey, I appreciate you telling the everyday chef like story, and promoting our work within the industry. And so it's helped me keep like my eyes on the ball a little bit.
It's a very similar approach with me in Chefs Without Restaurants. When I started, I was putting almost like exclusively my own content on a different platform. And then I thought, this is really easy. Just go hashtag, private chef, hashtag caterer, and find these people doing really cool stuff. Just ask them if I can share their stuff. And then they share, in their Instagram story that I shared their work. And then you get some followers. But you still, I think, have scaled really quickly compared to how long you've been going. I think that's fantastic. I've got a
Thank you.
I've got a chef group. Chefs Without Restaurants is also a group on Facebook. We have an active group of people, so feel free to drop in there. And when this goes live, I'll be putting it all out. But yeah, I know what you mean. Today's podcast release day for me. So first thing this morning, I'm putting the finishing touches. I gotta publish the podcast, and then you go into full on marketing mode. Go into Canva, create some artwork for it, go on Instagram, make sure you do the copywriting, then tag everyone. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, it was like 3 hours just to publish the podcast and get it out there for promotion.
Yeah, and it's been, especially like for me starting out, I've never done podcast or editing within software, so just kind of jumping into things, like my first podcast took me probably about like 8 hours of just editing, getting used to hearing yourself speak, because it's just awkward just listening to yourself talk. And it gets easier, or I guess, as you're in it for a while, it gets easier to know the eddings, and just be okay with what you have. But also just making, the best and the most quality content that you can for your listeners. And so, yeah, it's tough, but I guess, the rewarding factor, just what kind of keeps you going.
So what are you really focusing on now? Are you spending more time reaching out to people? Are people reaching out to you? Like, when you look at your workflow for this project, what does that look like? Is it just DMing people saying, hey, I've got this thing. Do you want to be on the podcast and submit a recipe?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like some weeks are better than others. Like my first week, it was strictly me just going into the DMs and saying, just explaining what I'm doing, what kind of work, and if they're interested, just reach out. I have a form that people will fill out, and right now I have a friend who's helping me with content, writing up the blog posts and the Instagram, which has kind of helped me concentrate more on the marketing aspect and getting people down for podcasts. But my second week, I had probably about, what was it, about 8 people that filled in forms. About 5 of those people I didn't even talk to, and so I'm like, oh great, I have something going. But then the next week, I had 3 forms. So it comes and goes. It comes in waves. And I'm not at the point right now where I can't just completely not DM people. But it's getting easier as you grow your audience. It flows a little bit more organically. So It's a mixture. It's a mixture of both. And right now I'm about a week out. So I used to post 7 day, like, even though it's very early, I was posting every day, 7 days a week, but now I cut down to five, just kind of Monday through Friday, or if I miss a day, maybe on the weekends. And I'm about a week ahead, so I have about like a week's worth of content right now of blog posts, which helps gets things a little bit easier. But when forms aren't coming in, then you start to get a little bit worried, and it that's when I'll do a little bit more direct outreach.
Yeah, we were getting a lot of them. We were kind of doing one recording session on Monday, and we usually do one. Sometimes we get two. Very rarely we do three, and we were releasing once a week. And then when COVID started, I was like, wow, I can do more of these from home. And I was sometimes recording like 5 episodes in a week. I'm like, now we can go 2 episodes, like 2 releases a week. But it's like, do I want to get overzealous there? Like, I don't know how fast I'm going to go through all my connections, and is that going to drop off? And then I'm going to have to cut it back. So how much should I have in the can versus how quickly do I get them out? I mean, right now I'm talking to people a lot about how their businesses are impacted with COVID. So I want it to be relevant, and I want to get them out now, especially if they're struggling and they've got a food truck and they're still open. I want them to tell the story of, hey, we're still open. Here's where you can find us. Here's how you can help. So I'm just trying to crank those out as fast as I can. Is this is this something you could monetize? I mean, have you thought about that? Like, is this just a passion project because you love doing it? You want people to tell their stories, or what's the long-term plan if there is one, and if there's not, I get that, but in the back of my mind, it's always kind of like, okay, is this something that could become like a stream of income? Could this ever potentially even become a full-time job? Like, where are you on that?
Yeah. So yeah, right now it's definitely not uh, my bread and butter. It's not paying the bills by any means. And so the cookbook behind it, it's generally just a just a love, like a passion project for the cookbook aspect of it. That's why all the proceeds are going to restaurants. I'm incurring some expenses of just getting kind of the logo design and artwork. I'm trying to reach out to, now that the Denver community, I'm trying to just keep it as local as I can, reach out to partners who are willing to help, try to minimize the expenses so I can give more back. And as far as other aspects of it, I've been thinking of other ways to hopefully be able to monetize it a little bit, either through apparel or affiliate program links. But I never want to be that person that's just constantly spamming, and it's not a money driven aspect of it. Eventually I would want to do, you know looking ahead, once restaurants and the culinary industry as a whole is kind of back up running 100%, I would love to start doing like a YouTube series. So either just getting maybe like a film crew, a student film crew, and doing more of a film series within their restaurant, and going a little bit more in depth than what you really can in an article. So those are kind of the different ways I'm potentially in the future, hopefully, looking to monetize a little bit. But as of right now, it's just concentrating on, getting, creating a following, building the audience, and then, the cookbook is the main focus. Just trying to get that out as soon as I can, but the best that I can, so I can really help the people that it's affecting the most within like the time that they need it, right? Because they're not going to need it next year, not knock on wood, when COVID is, no longer a thing. They need the support now.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I have tons of colleagues, and everyone's saying, they've been unemployed for 6 weeks and haven't even received their first unemployment paycheck right now. And some people are fortunate and have a little money banked. A lot of people don't, and they really need that money. So how fast can you get that to them is definitely a big concern.
Yeah, and it's changed too. Initially, I was trying to just do the proceeds to James Beard Award, or like some nonprofits, but just seeing how slow the government has been to putting the loans and the grants into like the actually small business hands, not the big conglomerates that are getting it. So that's why I've shifted the focus from more of the nonprofits to actually delivering those funds directly to the restaurants that are participating. So, because I think that will probably be the best and most effective way to actually make a change and be helpful.
Yeah, and as far as covering costs, something I recently did was I just set up a Venmo and a PayPal for the Chefs Without Restaurants organization and podcast, and no pressure, no guilt trip. I've built this community and it's been a long thing for me, over 3 years, and just put it out there and said, hey, listen, I'm super grateful for anything anyone wants to throw our way. If you want to donate a little money to help offset the cost, I'm spending upwards of about $40 a month when you look at like Buzzsprout and Auphonic and all the things we do to make it sound good. And we've bought some mics and stuff. It's like, if you just want to, throw in $1, $5, and people have been really generous. And then we haven't had to do a Patreon where someone's getting a cut out of it, and just having those links on there saying like, if you really like what we do, here's a little place you can give us some money. And that's really worked for us. And it's just helped to offset the cost of running the day-to-day of the podcast. I mean, I'm not able to quit my job and do this full time yet, but
Yeah.
it's nice.
Yeah, and I really love the way that you put the message out there for that, because it's not in your face like, hey, look at all the things that I've done for you. Why don't it's a very we have to support each other more than ever. And so it's, I believe, tough situations and will bring the best out of people, or will show the true light of people, as I should say. So yeah, I that's a great avenue, and I really love the message that and how you portray that.
I've just found people to be so great during these times, especially people in my own food community, as it relates to whatever you need. I had a friend come over one day on his way to work and just dropped a 12 pack of toilet paper on my doorstep, and put it in a trash bag in case it rained or something. People saying that like, hey, who needs flour? I've got some. Hopefully that kind of thing we'll continue doing, like really helping the people in our community and our friends, and sharing things and helping them all get by. I really hope that that's something that we see continue when all this kind of slows down a little bit.
Yeah, and just going back to different ways to show how you appreciate or love people, like giving those actions speak louder than words will ever do. Even if it just a pack of toilet paper, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's the gesture that is worth more than anything.
So what else do you want our listeners to know about your organization, your projects, or any upcoming things that you've got going on?
Well, yeah, I just would love to. I know your organization is more for like personal chefs and catering businesses. I love and support you guys too. I've spoken to people in those industry. My first podcast is a friend of mine who transitioned from the restaurant industry into his own personal chef and catering business. So the first podcast was all about how to do that, because I'm sure a lot of chefs or people want to get started but just don't know exactly how. So they you can follow me. I still want to hear your stories and how you're into this business, and yeah, just keep up to date, and any support that you could give, I would love it. And nothing, it's all kind of learn as you go on a basis. So I'm as I'm going, I'm seeing what works, what doesn't work. I'm constantly formulating, especially in the infant stage that it is. I'm always redrawing in different ways. So love some feedback on what you would want to hear, or how things are going, good and bad. That's how we learn, is through the bad. So yeah, if you could give a follow to Story in the Past, that'd be great. And just let me know what you think.
We put together a pretty comprehensive show notes, so I'll link you up in there and make sure everyone knows where to find you and how to connect.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, and yeah, that's great. And yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate it. It's kind of weird being on the opposite end of a podcast.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. Like I do the same thing. I go on a lot of podcasts. Actually, I went on a lot of podcasts before I started this. I mean, we just started this in November, so I had a little practice. It's kind of fun being on the other end of that. So
Yeah,
I like to kind of end my show with some kind of rapid fire question. So we're gonna have a little fun here for a couple minutes. The first question I've been asking everyone right now is, since most of us are in self quarantine, were there any ingredients that you went to make sure you had at the store, or something you stocked up on, or maybe wished you had, like knowing you're going to be home and not going to the store that often? What was important for you to go pick up?
Ooh, I love fried garlic. So there's a big Vietnamese community here in Denver, and so there's a lot of Asian grocery stores, and you can make your own fried garlic too, but sometimes it's just easier to get, just a jar of, fresh fried garlic. So I love garlic, and the fried garlic especially just brings a whole other aspect to the crunchiness and can really just put, a plain dish when you're feeling lazy into something a little bit better.
Do you have any favorite culinary resources, whether it be books, websites, anyone you're following on Instagram? Like, where do you find inspiration in the culinary world?
Yeah. So as far as when I'm experimenting, I love the Flavor Bible, the huge well-known book. It's just fun to kind of see like, oh, I want to make a chicken dish. What different ways and how can I manipulate it, or different ingredients to create it? One cookbook that me and my friend have been using, or before COVID and everything happened, was The Night Market. That's an LA Thai restaurant. They have their own cookbook. Amazing. That's where I really kind of fell in love with the fried garlic aspect of it. So, and just in general, I like to, I'm Greek, so I've grown up with Greek cuisine, like knowing how to make it, and it's just fun to change things up a little bit and broaden the horizon.
I gotta get Karen and Andrew on the show. Flavor Bible, we have 36. This is going to be episode 37 in the show, and I would say at least 75% of the guests say that that's their favorite book or culinary resource. I'm a huge fan of theirs. I love it, and it's just, I tell them all the time, because it's really funny. I actually emailed them in 1995. I mean, nobody was even emailing, but I got Becoming a Chef, which there's this whole story about my copy of Becoming a Chef. I've had it signed by upwards of 250 chefs. So I've said, like, if my house is on fire, it's the one thing I'm taking with me. But I sent them an email when I got that book when I was a freshman in culinary school. And I still have the email that I printed out on like that printer paper that has the holes on the side.
Mhm.
But I'm like, I keep hitting them up on Twitter. I'm like, guys, like, we got to talk, because everyone keeps talking about your book on the show. Like, let's sit down and do a podcast.
Yeah, for me too, especially going into different kitchens. That's one of the books you commonly always see, either, the chefs that cook within their home, or even in restaurants too, because it opens everything up, and you can kind of see what works, what doesn't, or how do you make a dish complete.
Yeah. So is there anything you want to be remembered for, either personally, professionally? I know that's not a quick fire, but that's kind of always our last question, like thinking about what your legacy is going to be.
Oh, that's tough.
It's kind of a nasty one to throw at the end there.
Yeah, yeah. Because one of the things it makes me uncomfortable is talking like about myself, and especially to like speaking of legacy. So I just hope, the this first cookbook will, be a success. Like, I hope people see the true light of what it means to be a chef, and what the backstory is of the chef, or the people, that create the food, or create those dining experiences that can make your day or turn around your day. And so it would just be, to me, it's never really like, I didn't really get into Story of the Past to promote myself. Like, it's all about just kind of creating that community. And I just hope that what I can do can bring the industry a little bit closer together, and hopefully too, with the cookbook proceeds, that it can give back to the restaurant community. And I don't know how to make a cookbook. I don't know like how to make a podcast, and that. So I'm just learning as I go too. So hopefully some people might take some inspiration to say, like, why not? Why can't I do it? It's one of those things where you don't know what you can do unless you get started, unless you take that first step into doing it. So if people can find some inspiration into making this world a better place, I'm all for it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, there's no barriers anymore, right? The same with my podcast. I mean, Some of the early podcasts that I recorded just don't sound great. They don't sound how I want them to sound. And you're like, well, you got to start somewhere. Everyone, musicians have those very deep, old first albums that like nobody ever heard. Same thing. Just first step is you got to get out there and do it.
Yeah, and especially too, there's unlimited amount of resources that are free to, or that are all within our fingertips. Looking on YouTube, what things to do, best practices, best tips, and especially for podcasts too, it's a low entry level to get in. You pay the hosting site, maybe the microphone, and so that's a bigger expense when you first get started. But you can find your voice, and if you know how to market, like, SEO, get found on Google, something that I'm learning on how to do right now. You can do anything.
Yeah, it's really weird. I use I don't know if you've been on the Chartable website where you can kind of track where you are on like iTunes charts. Like we're currently the number 4 food podcast in Nigeria. Like I've never had a guest from Nigeria. We don't talk about Nigerian cooking. Like maybe there's just not a lot of people in Nigeria listening to cooking shows. But if you had like 3 people in the country listening to it, like maybe that's enough to put you in the top 10. I don't know. It's just weird how that stuff works out.
Yeah, and it's some of those circumstances that you don't foresee happening. When I first started, storing on the past too, just meeting, I thought I'd meet some cool people, but it's, I've met so many people from around the world, and what we have in common is the love for food. And so it's very like refreshing to see that, we're, take the lines out of the sand, or the country boundaries. We're all just humans living in this world, and we're all generally the same. As far as like my travels really have kind of brought it out to the forefront. It's, we all have that basic need of, the food, shelter, and especially when as you get older, just making the situation for your kids better than what you had, in a way. So it's very, we have a lot more in common than we like to think. And one of those things that I didn't really foresee happening, now that it's talking about it, seems like it would be obvious, is just drawing all those commonalities and getting to know and branch off and meet people that you would never meet in your everyday life.
Yeah, it's great. And I love the project. I'm so excited to share this with people. So hopefully you'll get a big bump in followers and, maybe find some new guests that way.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, and I can't wait to have you on as well, and promote all the good work that you're doing. You've really created a great community within the niche of like the personal chef and catering business, but much more than that too. And I can't wait to have you on as well and promote your work and the great things that we're doing, because like we were saying before, now more than ever, we need to support ourselves, get the name out, and who knows what resources or things that people that we say, or the people that we have on our podcast will say, that might spark an idea and help that person in their everyday life.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. To all of our listeners, as always, this was the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast, and you can find us at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on all social media platforms if you search for Chefs Without Restaurants. Thanks, and have a great week.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, man. That was awesome.
Thank you. Very cool. I love it. I